So the next thing I'm going to talk about is the dynamic EQ, which I came across in the System 6000 by chance a little while ago, and it's been a great find for me because I used to have a software dynamic EQ that I used all the time, and unfortunately because of operating systems changing, that plugin is no longer available to me, and I just hadn't been able to find another software equivalent. So what I've done is I've set up a special chain that I now use for dynamic EQ, and I'm going to just show you now my process for using that, which I primarily use on vocals. I tend to find with most vocalists there's always 2 or 3 frequencies that just cut through when they sing certain notes that you don't want, and obviously you could automate that painstakingly with automation and EQ within a bit of software like Logic, which is what I use, but I think it's much quicker, and it's much easier if you can use a dynamic EQ to duck those frequencies when they really hit hard, and that's what I've done with the System 6000. So let me just run you through what we've got. For this particular example, in the frame I've got 4 different engines being used, and the reason for that is that each dynamic EQ is just one band, and the dynamic EQ that I used to use had 4. So what I've done is I've chained 3 dynamic EQs in a row, and in front of that I put a parametric EQ, which will all become more clear why I do that. So what I do is I put the parametric EQ right at the front. In this case I'm using the MDW high res EQ, and what I use that for is basically to find the frequencies that I'm wanting to get rid of. So I sweep through the frequency bands to find the offending EQ areas, and then I just turn the bands off. So it's really just a tool for helping me to zone in on where I want to get rid of those frequencies. So let's start by playing the track. This is a track by Laura Clapp, who's part of TC. It's a track I produced for her called Go, Just Let Go, and there are just a few frequencies that were problematic in it. So I'm going to play you it now without the dynamic EQ, so you can hear where the vocal's kind of pushing out in the wrong areas. So let me just bypass all the instances, and we're hearing it totally flat now.
It's long gone. If I could just let go of all my fears I've held on to for all these years.
So there's just a few things there that I don't like tonally, particularly on this bit here.
It's long gone. If I could just let go.
So let's just turn the effects off for a minute to make it an easier process, and I'm going to play that bit again, and I'm going to enable the EQ at the front of my chain, and I'm going to enable one of the bands. So let's start with this band here. Okay, now I've got it on a very tight Q, and I've already zoned in on the frequency, so let me put the frequency up so we can hear how it aggravates the sound.
It's long gone. If I could just let go of all my
You can hear that sound.
I've held on to for all these.
That frequency is really not nice, and I've zoned in on 2 other frequencies. So let's move to the next one, which is this one in the middle here. And let's hear that in action.
It's long gone. If I could just let go of all my fears I've held on.
Again, you can hear that kind of high shrill whistling on the edge, which again is a frequency I didn't want. And then finally I've got one more band on this one here, and let's have a listen to that one, which I've already zoned in on.
It's long gone.
Again, a nasty frequency. So I use the EQ just to zone in with a very tight Q and find those frequencies. I then bypass the EQ, and I've set up on the next 3 engines available to me on the System 6000 3 different instances of the dynamic EQ, and each one of those is set to the frequency that I found was aggravating the vocal. So that's my 1.95 kilohertz, and then the next one is 3.15, and then the next one's 4.35. So let's engage them one at a time, and you'll be able to hear how they really help in taming that vocal. Let's engage the first one.
It's long gone. If I could just let go.
And you can see that we're reducing just in that range.
I've held on to for all these years. Live for now.
That's the second one, much smoother.
It's long gone.
And the third one.
It's long gone. If I could just let go of all my
And that's all of them on.
I've held on to for all these years. Live for now, not yesterday. It's long gone. It's long gone.
That's just to the vocal in solo. So this is the vocal now that we've corrected it with the dynamic EQ.
It's long gone. If I could just let go of all my fears.
Now let's take those off. And now hear the same vocal again.
It's long gone. If I could just let go of all my fears.
And you can hear there's all those nasty frequencies that we didn't want. So this has really been a lifesaver for me. It's so important with vocals that you can work to get the absolute best sound possible for the vocalist and the track you're working on. And I have this permanently set up in my library, and I now know that whenever I've got that problem, I can just whack it straight out of Logic, straight into the System 6000, get it sorted out, get zoned in on the frequencies, and then bring it straight back into Logic and print it down onto the audio, and I'm ready to go with something else. So that's the dynamic EQ with the MDW high-res EQ in front of it, just to pinpoint the frequencies and work out what I need to duck.